Okay guys, welcome back. We have another video here for you today. Today we are sitting down with Phil again, but we also have Ziggy Dan, the man we have been talking about in our previous videos, his episodes. He's actually produced a couple more in that time, so we will definitely be showcasing those and promoting those at the end. But we also have him today to talk with us about some more of these sites. And like you've seen in his videos, he's very good at spotting these nubs in India. We're going to keep on going with that trend and show you a couple more temples in India today, and actually a third temple that Phil and I spotted just looking during our last recording. So this next temple we're going to show you after Warangal is one that is just as new to us as it is to everyone else. So Phil, Ziggy, welcome. How are you guys today?
Okay. How are we, mate?
Great.
It's good to see you here, Ziggy, with us. Fantastic to have you. Congratulations on your new videos, mate. What a brilliant set of publications, may I add. And thank you for joining us today. What a pleasure. How are you, mate?
Well, great. We can start with Warangal. I figured that one we had a lot of different nubs to look at. And again, Phil, you and I found a different part of Warangal that has nubs that no one's thought to look at before, and it's going to tie in to some of our other stuff that we've looked at in Greece. So I guess we should just start with that one first, right? Because in the previous episodes about Warangal and my channel and other channels, they focus on the temple itself, the proper temple in the center that's very ornate and embellished and pretty. And we've seen this before, and we can briefly touch on it again, that yes, there are nubs on this architecture as well. You see over here on the left, this block has a couple nubs on it. And then this gate, and maybe some of these other gates, down here in the bottom right has a nub on it. And that's the exact same spot as a nub on the Sun Gate at Tiwanaku. So we can talk about some real cross-continental connections here, because we also have the Chicana shape, right guys? You have the shape that we see all over Peru, very sacred to them. It shows up here at Warangal. It's actually the footprint of Warangal. So we have multiple overlapping hallmarks and connections. But what we haven't talked about is the more rough and industrial-looking fortified areas of Warangal, the perimeter walls. So let's pull up some of those today, and I'll pick a good one. Well, we'll find a really good quality one to show first. I have. How about this one? This is a nice one. So we spotted this one. I think all of us spotted this together a while back, but we didn't have nearly as good of a quality photo as this, but this one really shows them. So what would you guys like to say about this photo?
If I may interject at this point, I see that on the bottom course arrangement that we've got what we all study as the nubs, and you've got different variations of them as well.
Yes.
And as you go up the course arrangement, you have to look very closely. Ziggy has pointed this out to us as well, that maybe this could be different generations of builder, because the nubs stop at a certain course arrangement, don't they, Ziggy?
They do. Yeah, you're right. We didn't really see this at first, but now that he points it out, it is very curious. Why is there more on the lower courses and not so many up above? And then, yeah, also with the course arrangement, we have very thick courses and then very thin, slender courses. What is that about? Was the smaller courses done by less capable engineers or other people?
I think the top courses are from a different culture. I think that they were all cut. I think that they've been cut, split in half, and they're thinner. The bottom courses are twice as thick. They're stones that have fallen down, probably.
That's a good point.
They've been reused because it's been changed into a fort at a later date.
Yes, you can see up above as well. I mean, these ramparts, these are clearly cruder, smaller stones with mortar. You know, this is not the same as what's below. And you're right, these notched blocks, these could be repurposed, bigger blocks. And we spotted this just a few minutes ago. If you guys look really close, you'll see this cluster of holes. What is that about? Reminds me of some holes in Peru, actually, right? In the side of the
You get them in Baalbek as well.
And we
you
do.
Get them at Baalbek.
A lot of spots.
You've also got to look at the polygonal nature of what they were trying to show us on the bottom courses.
Yes.
Maybe the smaller blocks have got slight bevel line as well. Then you've got a line of what we call standardized nubs that everyone that watches us knows that we call standardized.
Yes.
And as you go around, you don't get them. You don't get them. There's maybe one or two. So I agree with Ziggy. I think that this could be a repurposed area, to be quite honest with you. I think at some point you've got a nub base stone style set of engineers, and as we move upwards, we don't see that same configuration, do we, Ziggy?
Right. Yeah. It seems like the very top is completely devoid of nubs. Even though there is some other curious stuff, yeah, the nubs are not present on the top courses. And then, of course, what's above that is just absolutely after the fact. Yeah, I like that photo. So we have some more. Let's look at some of the gates around this, because, you know, that's not all. How about... So first, before we, you know, look at some of the walls with nubs, we will show that there are some of these walls that don't seem to have any nubs. They have the beveled edges, the same course arrangements, but these blocks here don't necessarily, they don't really have any nubs that stick out to me anyway.
You have the polygonal aspect, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And you also have the fact that the megalithic builders go up to a certain level.
Yes,
you can maybe say on the seating arrangement that there might be nubs on the front, but it's showing different engineers for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can see the difference in the surface treatment. They could do really flat and smooth if they wanted to, but then these lower ones tend to all have this same kind of slightly pitted nature to them. Both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see on above the gate as well that that's a completely set of different builders again.
Yeah, completely different.
There was no way that that has been purposed at the same time as the blocks that we're seeing to the right-hand side and the left-hand side.
Yeah, yeah. And I have more of this, so we'll go over to one. Well, I wish I had the better quality photo of this one. Let me double check. Well, we do have this one. This one's nice. This one, yes, in the previous photo, same angle, worse quality. This is just turned and better quality. But yeah, what we're looking at here is very complicated. We have what looks like something on top that's later, smaller, and then we have this same repeating system of wider and slenderer courses. Sometimes
what jumps out to me there is, do you see how big the main door is, Andrew?
That's, of course, yes, the large door,
and then you have
the small door.
You have the smaller door to the left. It jumps out like Baalbek or the Treasury.
Aha, very good point.
You know,
yes.
Then, you know, you've also got polygonal stonework that we see in South America as well.
That's right, yeah, a little bit, but then you'll notice on the right hand, it makes me pause, because you'll see how there's the polygonal nature kind of goes away sometimes, and then it'll start back up again, right? The polygonal nature has a tendency.
And you've got like 1 times 1 nub above that small doorway on the left-hand side.
That's right, on the L-shaped block, you know, right?
Yeah, and also on the left-hand side where you've got the doorway, just above it, you've got 1 on its own.
That's right.
I mean, we could jump into quarrying, couldn't we? If these were quarried stones, then wouldn't they all have them on?
That's a good point. And why on the blocks like this one, it's not centered. It's off on the corner of the block. Not a good spot if you're going to lift from, or, you know, even...
Well, you can also see that that block is tailored for the blocks above, so it was necessary.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know? Or it wouldn't have fitted, would it? What do you think, Ziggy? What's your take on this?
I think the whole wall is a later addition.
That's a good point. Now let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Ziggy had a very good point here. Now some of these gates and doorways are fitted up to these walls, so they look like they might have been added on after the walls were completed.
Yeah.
And I want to point out here again with this right hand, that's a very straight course. They were able to adjust from polygonal to standard course on the fly like that. That's very impressive. And
Do you see that you've got that almost square style filler stone as well? Almost like
on
it was
both sides as well, Phil. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That is wild. It's a mirror image almost, like, or at least they were repeating their little technique here, this little nod or whatever this is implying. They did it on both sides, right.
Do you remember the photo that we saw where it shows the different colours of building? Like
Yes.
they were almost showing
We'll jump to
like
that
a
one.
personal building A to Z with the colour of stone that they may have used, for
Yes.
argument's sake.
Let me pause and I'll go to that one. Okay, here's the photo. Yes, like you were saying, Phil, they were doing something with colors of blocks here, right? There's this one very red block stands out from all the others.
Yeah, it kind of like looks to me that they were trying to show mineralogies of stone, like with the red you might be sort of looking at Petra. The blue I always look at as Warangal, where we are.
Right, these dark.
The yellow might be the limestone of, let's say, Egypt or South America.
Mm-hmm.
But why colour them like that? Why show us that?
Yeah, good point.
There has to be a reason. And then to the left of the wall, you've almost got your trapezoidal window with the beveled edge.
Oh, yes.
You've
right.
got, and I know, Ziggy, you're massive on that. This could be completely repurposed. So what is this telling us, mate?
These are additions.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The outside walls show totally different courtwork.
Yeah.
Right.
There.
I mean, it could be elephant stables back in India.
That's not a bad idea. I mean, a big door
Yeah,
for an
great
elephant.
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like Ziggy was saying, over on the right, it looks like these, or at least this gate in general, the walls have been butted up against the wall on the side. So the walls on the sides were finished first, then this gate was added. How much later?
I think it's a good point as well, where the stonework could have been moved on the header. If you've got such big animals, let's say like elephants whacking into the walls over time, it could have moved it. But to the right hand side, which is original to me, and you can almost see burnt stonework, polygonal, massive megalithic stones.
Yeah.
That looks original to me.
Me too.
So I do agree with Ziggy that front wall there could be a completely later addition.
It might be. Yeah, still by the same maybe advanced skilled engineers, but this might have been might have just been
well,
a reconfigured.
the left hand side, Andrew, you've also got on the second arrangement like a bevel black, haven't you?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
There's second course up. So our engineers were there. What the colours are telling us, I'm not 100%. I'd love any specialist Indian architecture experts to show us. Does that show us mineralogy? Does it show us course content?
Yeah.
Does it show us different time periods? I'd love to hear everyone's point of view.
Is there a cultural significance maybe to certain stones and walls like this? Yeah. We need some more context here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So we'll move on to a few more photos. I have a couple more I want to bring up. This one in particular, we are talking about more of this rebuilding. So maybe these inner flanking bits were added later to make the gateway smaller. I like that because they don't seem, again, smaller stones, different color, and they don't seem to fit as well. They seem like they've been tailor fit to made up with these older walls or with these more substantial walls.
There's a massive thing I'd like to talk about.
I know what it is. Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead and say it.
It's on the bottom right-hand block.
Yes.
And where we see the scrape marks per se at Egypt, we've interjected, could this be a similar mark to the ones we see around the Cleopatra Temple, the Philae Temple, where everybody says scrape marks. So we were looking here at the example at Warangal, and it leads on to the Philae Temple that we
Yes.
all have been looking at with reference to what people look at as the scratch marks or scrape marks. And I think it's relative here if we explain that those same marks are identical to Warangal. Now, if we look at that,
Yes.
and if we look closely, it's got the nubs on there at the Philae Temple.
Of course.
Also,
yes.
does that not suggest to you that there was a power output rather than a scrape mechanism? If
Yeah,
you were
you see them here, down by the bevels and where the nubs are, you see more scratches. And then
Now,
a blank spot,
if
and then a
they-
cluster.
Yeah, of course. Now, if they weren't scratches, and they were, say, for argument's sake, testing the technology that was being used to perform that, it would mean that we would have to condense the technology, i.e. say if we were using cold fusion and we were creating small black holes to produce vitrification. Now, vitrification can be produced by heat, and we can see that in other examples in Egypt where they could have been testing that. We see this on Ben Uncharted X's fantastic photos.
Yes.
And he shows us these are not just scrape marks. No.
There's more
We
going on.
see there's far more going on here. What do you think of this, Andrew? What does the clamp tell you here about the vitrification process? This is not sharpening arrows for me.
No.
It's a test of technology.
It does. I mean, we might be talking about a scratch made by a tool, right? But I don't.
Yeah,
think,
of course.
I don't think we are talking about a primitive spear point making this mark. We are talking about maybe an advanced tool of unknown origin, maybe something like the Shamir of Solomon in mythology, or the Vajra of India. You know, there are mythological parallels to what these could represent. But yes.
Well, if you're harnessing a specific power, if you were looking at, say, cold fusion, a technology like that, and you were producing mini black holes at a molecular level, when they reverse on themselves, like Sherman has showed us on specific things, then maybe it would leave that specific vitrification. If you were testing heat levels, you were testing application of that heat level. Now, that brings me to another point, where you've got the clamp on the side of it. We see the clamps all over the ancient world. We see them in South America, China, Egypt, and so on. When they were metallic and you were testing your application, then maybe when that clamp was spent, could it have turned to the stone? That is all a requirement of mineralogy. Cold fusion is a technology that we are actually learning. Would they be testing on these scrape marks around the Philae Temple, around the India, Warangal, the examples that we're looking at? Would it just be a test so they could see whether they were getting the technology correct later on down the line, Andrew, maybe?
Well,
and then when the clamp was spent and the circuit was done, it turned to stone. It's just an avenue of research I'm looking at. What do you think of that?
It brings up a good point, because we do see stone clamps in situ in some places. So there is the juxtaposition of metal and stone in these clamps. And like we saw back at the kiosk of Trajan, it really does make me wonder about the dispersion of these scratches, right? So if it was just simple spears, it'd be all over the base everywhere. But no, it's clustered. And it's almost like, yeah, they were scraping off the tip of their tool to prepare their tool, or maybe the tip was clogged, or I have no idea. Something fantastic.
Like a soldering iron.
Like a soldering iron. Or a welding gun. I say those analogies a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
I think in those terms, at least, because that's what these traces are making me think of.
Wouldn't it make more sense on some of the huger, more megalithic buildings that we see, i.e. like Baalbek, the Philae Temple, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and here where you're seeing the vitrification of stone, there must have been heat application at some point. Now, if you were looking at it on a molecular level, they would have had to have tested it. They would have had to have tested it. Of course they would have. What are your thoughts on that, Ziggy?
Can you focus into the interior of the gate?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On the lower. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see the line. It's a darkened line, and it's on a lot of temples. We call it the water line, but we don't necessarily know if it's always water. But it's a sedimentation line. Something there is a darkened patch, and they seem to
inside the gate and the interior wall.
Yes, inside as well, and it corresponds with these scratch marks, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does.
Here's something I just noticed, a drain hole down here in the bottom, cut into that block, those 2 blocks. Actually, it's one of those complex holes that goes over 2 blocks. So how about that?
If you needed to cool something down, if you needed coolant, would you not have those holes as a water cooling? You'd have needed something. Like when we look at the boxes, the Lycium boxes, the Egyptian boxes, if they were containers for technology, the Serapeum boxes, things like that. Mm-hmm. We've looked at dolmens, we've looked at all sorts that could have contained that. When they come to the more ornate work that we're looking at now, and yes, it does perform the nubs, we've got bevel blocks, but why have those specific scrape marks in one area?
Right.
It's like you're testing a tool for heat application.
I get that feeling as well. They were preparing their work and their tool was dirty or clogged, and you had to scrape it and do it against the temple. Now, why did they choose to do it against the temple like this on the outside on the finished surface? I don't know, but it just the clustering, the patterns, and the parallels across countries now. What does this mean? I think it's more than just Romans sharpening their spears or...
You've got to look at it as well, just on that one side, Andrew,
right.
When we talk about variations of nubs, which is our profession.
Sure, right.
You have got one specific, tiny, small section that contains the blocks. Yes, there might be individuals elsewhere,
right.
but they are segmented to that area.
Yes.
And you've also got, on the bottom right-hand side, the testing of the tool. Now, could that mean setting for the tool? And the specific engineer looks at ×1, ×2, ×2, ×1. That's how we set the tool. Now we can do the specific columns. Because let's be fair, these things are out of proportion to what we could do today. So there had to have been a code, a language, something that set what they were doing. Mm-hmm. Now, if we surmise that, like we see the Serapeum boxes, if they were containers for technology, a production line like Guy says, for argument's sake, or a battery that you and I surmise, if they were containing technology, you would have to test it somewhere, wouldn't you?
Sure. It does seem like, and you notice the clusters of nubs, there are more nubs where there are more scoops. And as the nubs go away, there are less and less scoops, except for right down here, you have this one last cluster. And, there are more...
That looks exactly like the Indian one that we have been looking at Warangal today,
that specific cluster, it really does. It almost, looks like 3 or 4, maybe 5 scoops in one spot. And yeah, that really reminds me of our Warangal spot. I mean...
It's identical.
We don't have any more than this. Granted, this is our only spot so far.
Yeah.
But now
we'll have to look for more.
Absolutely. That's very compelling to me, though.
It is, and like the coloured stone as well that we see here.
That's right. That one's very pink.
Yeah, Ziggy prescribes that a lot of this site could be repurposed. Mm-hmm. I agree with him. I think it was completely different in antiquity.
Could have been.
I really do. I think that Warangal may be one of the most ancient sites in the world, but it was completely different.
The coloured stone is because they'd used all the other stone in the area. They must have imported that from somewhere else.
That's a very good point, right? They've had to switch quarries. Okay, and a few more things we're going to look at here at Warangal. Now, Ziggy and I have talked about, again, the inside, the nice ornate temple, but then right outside, around these more defensive looking walls, we also have these very big steps or seats, like amphitheater seats. And
they are like amphitheaters, I agree.
And
100%.
What do you guys see on the amphitheater seat? A nub, right? Nubs on these
Straight
seats.
away.
Straight
Straight
away.
away.
I mean, you can look right over in the same photo where this is where we just were with that doorway with the nubs. This is right here next to it. You can see how large these blocks are and how this gate was probably made up against this. So this amphitheater or this set of steps was probably earlier and part of the original build. So I have another photo of this that's not as good. The quality's not as good. I'm going to make you guys squint. But just to drive the point home, so one isn't going to do it, I know. We'll see if I can get you all the other photo here. Yes, I know it's not very good, but for the trained eye, if you zoom in and look over here on the left, 1 on this block, 2 on this block. Very small little nubs on these long, large slabs. Definitely not.
You've also got to look at the point, Andrew. If this was quarried stone and it was just every single time we take this out of a quarry in Warangal or Egypt or somewhere else, this was a standardized operation to like Prien-esque style.
Prien, right? Mm-hmm.
And
Myra.
It's simply
Hierapolis.
It isn't on. It is Petra.
Delphi. Well. We can name them all day.
Delphi.
Yeah.
we can name them all day.
There's
249 different amphitheaters in the world.
At least.
And these are showing singular ornate nubs on not every single step.
Correct.
No.
Yeah.
Just on one here and there.
Just like
Is it an engineering mark?
I think so, and it has to tie into what we were talking about in my amphitheater episode. I mean, this is the same phenomenon. Now it's in India.
Agree. And then when you're going from Petra to Prien to India Warangal, that then suggests it can't be coincidence through repetition of quarrying. That is impossible.
It's too specific, and at this point it's way too specific. And there's too many other repeating hallmarks on top of it, right? The Chicana shape, the nubs, the polygonal walls, the bevel blocks. It's building up. We're building a very compelling case.
The lozenges, the concentric circles,
the metal clamps.
10 or 12. Yeah, I agree.
It's all there.
Just isn't intuitive. Yeah, I agree.
All right, we'll move on to this new site we're talking about now. So next we're going to move about 65 kilometers away from Warangal to a site called Palmet. And this Phil and I just stumbled upon while we were trying to find more of those amphitheater seat photos, those step seat photos. We were looking, just through the Google algorithm and how it gives us photos, and this site popped up. The first photo, we knew we were onto something. Right, Phil? Right away, you can see.
Yeah. You can see on the right-hand side, on the column.
On the columns, yes.
Square nub.
And this big square one on this blank stone, right? Yes.
Wow.
But not on the left stone, right? Yeah. We didn't see them on the steps.
I don't know how many people in India will actually know of this temple. I'd love to hear from them on what's documented on here.
Yes, me too.
But if you look as well on the left-hand side of the window, you've got almost lozenge styles.
Yes, the little checker pattern. And yeah, you zoom in, it is the actual Chicana shape again. You're right.
Yeah, it is. And
these screens,
with the columns being nubbed at the bottom, look at those square-shaped. We find them on every temple that we've looked at.
This one's curious, Phil. This one has little bumps on top of the nub. That's very curious.
To the left-hand side as well, you've got a square nub too.
That's right.
And it's like a pitted middle, which says to me the mineralogy is exactly the same as the stone.
I think so.
That's red. The one on the right is gold.
Right.
But it's coloured in afterwards. But they are specifically the same mineralogy of the stone that was used.
Yeah, there's some staining, but yeah, this is obviously the stone that the pillars and the blocks are made out of. And
yeah, absolutely.
They're not on the steps here, which is curious, you would think. But then, of course, it's being excavated. You see the dirt around it. How much farther down does it go? Where's the actual foundations, right?
Yeah, the foundation of that would show in my opinion, more nubs the further down that we went.
Very
on
likely.
That temple.
Very
So,
likely. And you'll
yeah,
notice.
it's the second.
This is
The
curious.
second.
How about this? A tiny little square hole where a nub should be on, the nub is on the other side. On this side, it's a square hole. Very curious. Like maybe an inverted nub, an inverted square nub, perhaps.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what we'll show you next.
Around it.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ziggy.
There's some discoloration.
You're right. Yeah, I should point that up too.
Might have been something chipped off.
Yeah. Let me see if it'll let me stay zoomed in here. Yes, it looks like there is a little bit of a discoloration around it, the darkening. That's curious. Yeah. And then, of course, the mineralogy between these two different stones. This is a different type of stone than this. And then we'll see in other examples where there's like statuary and Nandi cow statues and stuff inside. They're going to be a darker stone, that very polished serapeum-like box stones. But this
People
next
speak to us, Andrew, about how the ornate work would have been carried out in India because of literally the magnificence of how well it's done.
Agreed, right?
Well, on this small temple here, we don't just see one or two hallmarks, do we? We're seeing literally a obituary of all the hallmarks, the square, column nubs at the bottom. We're seeing different mineralogies and colours of stone used. Now, when we looked at this temple next to it, we found probably one of the best examples of nub temples we've ever seen.
Yes, look at that.
Ziggy, you were brilliant at telling us how the arrangement on this temple could have been formed. There's so much to look at here. On the left-hand side, we've got variations of nubs, which in your opinion, Ziggy, was?
That's all the part. And the
definitely.
more ornate part has been added on later.
See, I could see that as well. That's a very good point, because what's on the left is much better held together than what's on the right. What's on the right has been, shaken by some kind of earthquake cataclysm, and it's obviously become dislodged. But the structure with the nubs on it is still intact. It's still straight. All its courses are still straight. This was the most advanced, the strongest part of the structure.
And do you see the variation within the nubs on there?
Yes, they're large, right? These are big for the wall. You've
got standardized _2.
That's right, the standard
You've
shape.
got ×1. You've got where a filler stone maybe could have been added.
Yeah, that's curious. That little hole there could have been maybe a gutter, the drain spout again, something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, the drain spout phenomena that we keep finding.
Right, this could.
I wonder whether any of our Indian temple experts could tell us whether there is a separate side here to this specific temple that we're finding. Also, I look at the top part of it and I refer to work that I do with Dave at Uchronia Utopia. Could there have been some sort of star alignment center at the top? I say that because we're finding bevel blocks at the top of there, yes.
Yes, they do have beveled
edges.
edges.
The quality, but look at the bevel edge blocks at the top of there.
Something's going on.
What's your thoughts on that?
It makes me wonder, Phil, right? Because, yes, there's mortar, it's crude masonry, but there's an attempt here at making the surface treatment of these older or maybe just better blocks. So, yeah, what was going on top of this temple? Why did they think to put these up here? Was it an observatory of some kind, a platform to, do celestial observations and calculations?
Well, I'd personally like to see. I know this is really hard because we find HD pictures through Google and different applications. I'd love to see on top of there what's behind that bevel set. What was there?
And have a look at the base stone, right where your cursor is now.
With the grooves, right, Ziggy?
Yeah.
See, now we've seen these in Egypt. It could be like the repeating wedge holes, right? But there might be a little bit more complicated answer to that. Just like with these scoop marks, It might look
Yeah.
like a wedge hole, but maybe there's something more advanced going on that creates a similar artifact in the stone, right? It might still be part of the splitting process, but it might not just be wooden wedges or
Could it pertain to that there may be another level underneath there?
it could have. I mean,
Could,
look
could
at
there
this
be
stone in
something
general. Let's
interesting?
think about this. This stone has a very sharp edge on the top part. It's been worked, but they left the lower half very rough.
How rough the next stone to the right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The foundations.
Is this all one
I
stone?
agree.
This might
I
be two
agree.
stones here. Yeah, but yeah, they're very rough. But then yes, the very next course, they've gone completely pristine, sharp and smooth.
And do you notice as well how
Some little cuts.
ornate every single temple we see in India is, and how crude this bottom layer is?
Yeah.
It just doesn't ring true with some of the temples that we see there, yet it contains all the hallmarks of the most ancient builders and engineers.
Right. So
Something was going on here.
So I think Ziggy's onto something with maybe this
So
left-hand
do I.
building being older, because you'll notice some of the motifs change as well. The border change. I mean, it repeats, but it's
What would they
changed a
what
little
would they
bit.
have contained in that nub half, Ziggy?
Oh, I wonder.
I don't know. The shrine.
The shrine, yes, yeah, that would be the
Maybe a shrine, or the power source, or
Omphalos, is it?
the Shiva Lingam, right?
Yeah.
yeah, agree.
And we've seen that before, where there's been internal nubs in these chambers with the Shiva Lingam in them, or with on the columns nearby. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. What a fantastic temple.
we are so lucky to find this. Yeah, there's only 3 photos, guys. That's the best one. You can see this other front angle. There really aren't any more nubs. I mean, there might be.
If you look to the left-hand side of the steps here, Andrew, almost like you've got like a facade that's fallen down.
Yes.
It like shows to me like you've got. I know I'm a massive advocate of subterranean levels, but what on earth could have been underneath there?
Yeah, and you notice the
Why?
retaining wall. This is different. This is just block and mortar, brick and mortar. So it's shoring it up, and like we saw in the previous photo, that part of the foundation was still being excavated. It really makes you wonder how far down they go, and what's inside and the bottom of them.
Yeah, agreed. Or could it contain power?
There you go.
Contain...
I found another one over here on the right.
Look at that.
So yeah.
So it was part of the original build, was the nub builders. Simple as that.
But
it was a nub build.
But
do you see underneath it could have a bevel line as well? Could that be a bevel line just slightly underneath that nub?
It might actually, and that would make it more precision than the other blocks around it. Yeah. Oops, sorry.
Well, it would also pertain to other sites as well, wouldn't it?
And by the way, there's your very dark stone polished Nandi inside, right? The shrine area. That's not the shrine. The shrine is farther in. But yes, this darker stone that's very nicely polished. But yeah, we'll go back over here. I think you're right. There is a bevel line on this block. So, I mean, if you're talking about a bevel block with a nub on it, you could be talking about Jerusalem, couldn't you? Because the exact same thing exists there.
The Levi Mausoleum.
The Levi
you
Mausoleum.
Could be talking about in Turkey.
Right, yes.
Pitted middle there, where it's coming across darker slightly on that because of age, maybe.
Maybe, yes. And another angle where we can see the rough edge of that block from before with the grooves in it, over on the left.
I mean, people laugh at me with this comment, and I don't care, but with the 3.75 million year timeline of an engineer within Hinduism,
it's in
why
their
are our
mythology.
hallmarks in stone being shown so concisely over India on a ley line on all their temples over 1,000 kilometers plus?
Yeah. It's like
why are they all being shown? It is not coincidence.
No, it's like with the Shamir of Solomon and the Vajra and these things that we mentioned in their mythology. How much of their mythology do we take as truth? I mean, there's parallels that might explain some of this, and I don't have any better explanation. There has not been a recreation or a replication of what we see on these ancient temples.
No, I completely agree. Copies. Yes.
Yes, imitations.
when you look at the more ornate, complete temples in India, I've got to be honest, it's some of the best work I've ever seen.
Me
And
as
we
well.
studied every block in the ancient world, more or less, you and I.
Yes. India is unparalleled. And we talk about with their columns especially,
yeah.
right? The columns, they're more than just lathe turned. They've got all kinds of square edges and spiky bits, and then figurative carvings on top of that. They're amazing.
Which does suggest, like we said earlier on, that there was a power output of the most fine, unlearned technology out there. We have to apply different realms of thought to how they got to that, because that is not copper, chisel, sticks and stones, is it, gentlemen?
No. This is way more advanced and way more mysterious.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Well, guys, we're almost out of time. That was just a couple sites, Warangal region, real close to each other, but a whole bunch of new finds that none of us really knew about before. We of course knew that there were nubs in this area and all this and that, but when you go around the second and third time on these sites, you can find all kinds of things sometimes. And of course,
Can I say a massive thank you to Ziggy Dan for coming on our show today, and for all his hard work on the nubs, because I've got to say to you, Ziggy, you are one of the best nub finders and production artists of the phenomenon that I have ever seen, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes.
Cheers, Phil.
Yes. Thank you, Ziggy. Those videos are perfect.
Honor. It's an honor.
Well, thank you guys, and we will continue this conversation in the future, and we will also go into other avenues and other regions. But I think in the next couple, we might continue this India trend. We have a few more of these temples to talk about, some more new finds. But I would love to go back over to Turkey, because we have a lot of new sites over there in Turkey, thanks to an account on Instagram. So look forward to some more from India and more from around the world with Phil and Ziggy, and hopefully some more people in the future. Thank you, guys.
The very best.